Multiple forces of the Eastern Theater Command of Chinese People's Liberation Army started drills codenamed Justice Mission 2025 around Taiwan Island Monday, said the spokesperson for the Theater Command. On Tuesday, they will conduct the major military drills in following waters and airspace, during which live firing activities will be organized, specifically covering 5 areas with the following coordinates.
With vessels and aircraft approaching the Taiwan island in close proximity from different directions, troops of multiple services engage in joint assaults so as to test their joint operations capabilities. It is a stern warning against Taiwan independent separatist forces, and it is a legitimate and necessary action to safeguard China's sovereignty and national unity.
Meanwhile, the Chinese government spokespersons also made these statements.
The U.S. negative Taiwan-related bills grossly interfere in China's internal affairs, send a seriously wrong signal to Taiwan independent separatist forces, and severely undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait by going back on its commitments and escalating arms sales to Taiwan. The U.S. is emboldening Taiwan independence radicals and pushing the Taiwan Strait toward the brink of war.
The DPP authorities stubbornly cling to the separatist position of Taiwan independence. They attempt to seek independence by soliciting U.S. support, even at the cost of turning Taiwan into a power keg and armory. This fully exposes the DPP authorities' true colors as a troublemaker of peace, a dangerous creator of crises, and a warmonger.
Earlier, the U.S. Defense Security Cooperation Agency said on December the 18th that Washington has approved more than $11.1 billion arms sales to China's Taiwan region, the largest package ever announced for the island and the second during the Trump administration. In response, Beijing has already decided to take countermeasures against the 20 U.S. military-industrial companies and 10 senior executives involved in the sales. On the latest development, here is our latest panel discussion. Joining us in Beijing, Rong Ying, Senior Research Fellow from the China Institute of International Studies. In Shanghai, Josef Gregory Mahoney, Professor with East China Normal University, and also in Taipei, Joanna Lei, former Kuomintang Legislator. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Now, according to the latest news, the multiple forces of Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese PLA started drills, codenamed Justice Mission 2025, around Taiwan Island on Monday. Now, your latest response to this, what does this mean? Go to you, Professor Rong.
Well, I think this announcement or this operations, military exercise, has long been expected after the news of the United States for the largest ever arms sales to Taiwan, and it is also legitimate and necessary. I think certainly the purpose is, of course, meant to send out a very strong and serious message, not only to the Taiwan independent separate forces, but also those external forces. I think in this case, the United States, for supporting or for, I think, using Taiwan to contain China. And equally important is that this exercise is meant to demonstrate the capabilities, the war fighting capabilities, their combat readiness capabilities to deter any particular sort of interventions, external interventions. In this case,
we have noticed that it is not only the Army, but also Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force all joining together. Meanwhile, the area that is being covered, according to the latest news, is both north of Taiwan Island, southwest of Taiwan Island, southeast of Taiwan Island, and east of Taiwan Island. It means everywhere around the Taiwan Island. And also exercise focus on subjects such as maritime and air combat readiness patrols, seizing comprehensive patrol, blockade of key ports and areas, multiple dimensional deterrence from the outer perimeter. and multiple ships, aircraft approached Taiwan Island from various directions. Various branches of the armed forces conducted joint strikes, aiming to test the joint operational capabilities of theater command's forces. Now, go to you, Professor Gregory Mahoney. Given the scale, the intensity, and also the sophistication of this latest drill, what does that say for China's readiness when there is a crisis going on across the Taiwan Strait?
I think it's precisely this. There's this narrative again in Washington that China isn't ready to go, that China isn't ready to defend itself, and therefore the U.S. needs to prepare Taiwan separatists for this eventual conflict. And the point that I think the signal that Beijing is signaling, the signal that is coming from Beijing is that no, we're ready to defend ourselves now. So be prepared.
All right. Joanna Lei, you are in Taipei. Tell me more about the response on the island about the latest development.
The reactions are very restrained because it is against three very volatile backgrounds. One is the unfinished U.S.-Taiwan trade negotiation. Second, the already very volatile Takaishi statement and the kinds of reaction it has already spawned. Thirdly, the PRC position is extremely clear and uncompromising, both to Japan and to Taiwan independence movement. So if you look at Taiwan, the Lai Ching-te government actually has a deliberately restrained messaging. They did not celebrate this large number of arms sales. In terms of the Legislative Yuan, which is the main theater for the opposition party, they have also not raised a lot of voices in terms of this because they are looking at a responsible position to support self-defense, but also asking for accountability.
And meanwhile, Joanna, as we know, there has been quite some political turmoil on the island itself. So what does the latest movement, both of the arms sales to Taiwan and the central government here in Beijing's response toward this mean for many politicians on the island?
Taiwan has an ongoing negotiation with the United States in terms of our trade and tariff. To date, Taiwan has been forced to acquiesce to one after another conditions. So perhaps this one large arms sales will be a down payment of an ongoing negotiation. I think it is really, really important to notice that the LY has the blue camp and the white camp repeatedly asked the green camp to be accountable. Whatever you want to do in terms of providing defense or additional security guarantee, you need to present a picture that you have actually gotten something in return. To date, we have nothing in return. So these are things that Taiwan government has yet to answer to the people through the Legislative Yuan. So overall, while it seems to be extremely quiet, it does not go unnoticed. The thing is, we have not gotten anything back.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to the studio and also with Professor Mahoney. Now, Mr. Rong, besides the readiness that China shows about the possibility of dealing with the Taiwan crisis, what else do you think it shows to the international community?
I think we may have to come to the understanding, I hope that a shared understanding that the military exercises, the drills and the skills like that, the latest one, has always been, over the past few years, a kind of response, a kind of countermeasures towards the provocations, development in the island and its external, the separatist forces and its external supporters. So I don't think it's a kind of initiated by the Chinese, the mainland side. This is a point I would put it on the table. If you look at the last two sort of similar exercise, for example, the code name, as far as I can see, the joint shield, that was a kind of response countermeasures vis-a-vis the former Speaker of the U.S., Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. And even this year, the Strait Sounder exercise was again aimed at sort of other responses to Lai Ching-te, the Taiwanese leaders' moves towards separatist, or independence. This one again, as I think the announcement by the Eastern Theater Command made very clear. That's why I think they said it is legitimate, it is sort of necessary. It's not meant to show the responsibility, but most important, to deter, I think, development on this line. It's not the mainland, the Chinese side ready or to launch. And as a principle, as a policy, I think on Taiwan, certainly we are seeking for final complete reunification, but also making utmost efforts for peaceful and for the strive for the vision or prospect for peaceful unification.
So you're trying to get the record straight. That is,
very much
it is
so.
not China, the central government of China, that is provoking crisis along across the Taiwan Strait, but rather it is only in response to some of the earlier provocations coming from both the island and also coming from other parties that the central government, the latest exercise as well.
That's right. That
All right.
is, yeah.
The announcement of arms sales to Taiwan has certainly made China to decide take countermeasures with anti-foreign sanctions laws against the 20 U.S. defense-related companies and 10 senior executives who have engaged in arming Taiwan in recent years. That is according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry.
Well, let me reinforce my colleague's point on this being a provocation from the West and not something that's coming from China. We know that this is not a new problem. The U.S. has supported Taiwanese separatists since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949. And we know that this has persisted despite the mainland displacing Taiwan on the United Nations Security Council, despite the joint communiques and U.S. recognition of the one China policy. In fact, what this all links back to is something called the first island chain strategy, and Taiwan has become the most important link in that. And we've seen since Biden, the U.S. moving very boldly. Pelosi's visit was mentioned, but we saw many other things coming from Biden, including AUKUS, because the island chain strategy stretches from Japan all the way down to Australia. And we've seen this advancing to try to limit China's access in the South Pacific and the South China Sea, but also the broader Pacific. Now, again, as I mentioned, the U.S. War Department officials have testified in Congress to try to fearmonger and to garner support for this new weapons sale. And we've also seen that all of these developments are in tune with the new national security document that was recently released by the Trump administration, which speaks directly to the island chain strategies. And this, should not be conflated with the recent trade war ceasefire or, the unwarranted optimism that Trump would refocus U.S. imperial energies on Latin America and abandon its positions against China and the Pacific. And in fact, Reuters has also recently reported that Trump officials told the U.S. news agency early this year to expect what we're seeing now. And thus we see these PLA drills surrounding Taiwan, asserting sovereignty and security. And we see China responding with the countermeasures directed at the companies that are now going to be selling the weapons to Taiwan.
So what you're saying, Professor Gregory Mahoney, to me, it seems you're suggesting this latest reaction is not just about arms sales, but also against the strategic approach that the U.S. administrations have been having toward Taiwan. Is that what you're saying?
I would say two things. First, as a Marxist, we never like the word reaction. So yes, China is reacting to a provocation, but this is not reactionary. This is part of a long-term counter strategy that has been deployed against a strategy that has been deployed against China since 1949. That's the first point. The second point is we have to look at this in the broader context of AUKUS, the selling nuclear submarines to Australia, reinforcing anti-China positions in the Philippines, deploying U.S. Special Forces to Taiwan, and the more recent provocations we've seen where it appears that Japan is increasingly serving as a proxy in this strategy against China.
All right. Now, go to you, Professor Rong. Exactly what is the fact? What is the history that we are talking about if you say China is on the right side of the history? And what are the historical documents that we are referring to? What should people with intellectual interest be able to research and try to understand on their own, make judgment on their own, exactly what happened?
Well, if you talk about the question of Taiwan, I think historically there's no ambiguity in terms of international law. I mean, we're talking about the Cairo Declaration, talking about the Potsdam Proclamation. We're talking about I think the bilateral agreement China has been signed with the countries which now have diplomatic relations. They all committed to the fact that Taiwan is part of China. The People's Republic of China is the sole government representing all China, and they should commit to China's unification. This is loud and clear. This is on the record. I mean, on this document. So anything that happened related to Taiwan, whatever disputes or different, is because they don't. First and foremost, they wanted to have so-called, like the Japanese case, different reinterpreted that. And most importantly, I think in the case of the United States, they committed, but they never fulfilled that commitment. For example, the question of arms sales and its relationship
right.
with it. Yeah.
Now, Professor Gregory Mahoney, we understand the U.S. is always arguing, well, we signed several documents. You know, on the one hand, we have the joint communique with China, but on the other hand, we also have different political documents that give us the quote-unquote the maneuvering space when it comes to the issue of Taiwan. What do you think?
I think Washington believes that China is in a position where it needs to keep the ceasefire, the trade war ceasefire in place for as long as possible, and that this may create some restraint on the Chinese side. But I think that the operations that we're seeing, the drills that we're seeing today around Taiwan Island demonstrate that this is something that speaks directly to a very serious problem, because as Beijing has made it very, very clear, moving more and more weapons, moving more and more U.S. support into Taiwan to support Taiwanese separatism is something that is very, very dangerous and could spark a much bigger conflict. So that, I think, will take precedence over trade-related concern.
All right. Thank you so much for all of you joining us. Really appreciate it.